The poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon are known as the Knights Templar, which was a military order of the Catholic faith. It became one of the wealthiest and most popular military orders in Western Europe. They were founded around 1119 and headquartered on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, existing for nearly 2 centuries. After the First Crusade, when the Franks captured Jerusalem from the Fatimid Caliphate in 1099, many Christians made pilgrimage to various sacred sites in the Holy Land. But bandits preyed on these Christian pilgrims as they attempted to make the journey from Jaffa to Jerusalem. In 1119, the French knight Eudes de Payens approached King Baldwin II of Jerusalem and Warmud, Patriarch of Jerusalem, proposing to create a Catholic monastic order for the protection of these pilgrims. King Baldwin and Patriarch Warmud agreed, and the king granted the Templars a headquarters as a part of the royal palace on the Temple Mount in the captured Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Crusaders called it the Temple of Solomon and hence became known as the Templars. Then the order, with about 9 knights, included Geoffrey de Saint-Omer and André de Montbard, had few financial resources and relied on donations to survive. But the Templars found a powerful advocate in Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, the French abbot responsible for the founding of the Cistercian order. From Bernard's support, they gained a formal blessing. The Templars became the favoured charity throughout Christendom, receiving money, land, businesses, and noble-born sons, often not directly in line of the patriarchal primogeniture, eager to help with the fight in the Holy Land. Although the primary mission of the order was militaristic, relatively few members were actual combatants. The majority acted in support positions to assist the knights and manage the financial infrastructure. The Templar order, through its members, was sworn to individual poverty, was given control of wealth beyond direct donations. Accumulating wealth, the knights in 1150 began generating letters of credit for pilgrims journeying to the Holy Land. Pilgrims deposited their valuables with a local Templar presbytery before embarking. They received a document indicating the value of the deposit. They used that document upon arrival in the Holy Land to retrieve their funds in an equal amount of treasure. This innovative arrangement was really an early form of banking, and it improved the safety of pilgrims by making it less attractive target for thieves, and also contributed to the Templars' finances. In the mid-12th century, the Islamic world had become more united under effective leaders such as Saladin or Salah ad-Din, and the re-established Sunni regime in Egypt. The Knights Templar were occasionally at odds with the 2 other Christian military orders, the Knights Hospitaller and the Teutonic Knights, and decades of feuds weakened the Christian positions, both politically and militarily. Jerusalem was eventually recaptured by the military forces under Salah ad-Din in 1187. The Templars were forced to relocate their headquarters to other cities in the north, such as the seaport of Acre, which they held for the next century. Then their headquarters moved to Limassol on the island of Cyprus, and they also attempted to maintain a garrison on Awad Island, just off the coast from Tortosa, now in Syria. In 1302 or 1303, however, the Templars lost the island to the Egyptian Mamluk Sultanate in the siege of Awad. With the island gone, the Crusaders lost their last foothold in the Holy Land. The Templars were organised as a monastic order similar to the Cistercian order. The organisational structure had a strong chain of command. each country with a major Templar presence: France, Poitou, Anjou, Jerusalem, England, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Tripoli, Antioch, Hungary and Croatia had a master of the order for the Templars. The Grand Master was appointed for life, who oversaw both the order's military efforts in the east and the financial holdings in the west. The history of the Knights Templar in England began when the French nobleman Hughes de Payens, founder of the Grand Master of the Order, visited the country in 1128 to raise men and money for the Crusades. King Henry II, 1154 to 1189, granted the Templars land across England, including some territory near Castle Banyard in the city of London, where they built a round church patterned after Knights Templar headquarters on the Temple Mount. In 1184, the Templars' headquarters was transferred to the nearby New Temple, or Temple Church, where once again they built a round church. This was patterned after the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. It was consecrated in 1185 and became the location for initiation rituals. By 1185, the Order of the Knights Templar had extensive holdings in London, Hertfordshire, Essex, Kent, Warwickshire, Worcestershire, Shropshire, Oxfordshire, Cornwall, Lincolnshire and Yorkshire. And many Shropshire families provided sons, although, as I've said, often not directly in line of the patriarchal primogeniture, to fight in the Crusades. Those I can identify include, although there will have been many others, the Earls of Bradford's ancestors included many family members who fought as Knights Templar in the 13th century Crusades. In the local church St Andrew's there are wooden effigies to those crusaders. Robert and Guy Corbett were distinguished crusaders in the Holy Land. Robert accompanied his father to Tunis and was drowned there in 1270. Guy de Pickford, a crusader, was the lord of Pitchford Manor from 1272 and built the local church of St Michael, which contains an oak effigy of him. The Walcotts are believed to have been of Saxon origin. In the 11th century, a large tract of land was said to have been given to the Bishop of Hereford by the Walcott owners of estates in Lydley. A defensive castle was erected from which the present town of Bishop's Castle took its name. A William de Walcott joined the crusade of Richard the Lionheart, where 180 ships and 39 galleys sailed from England on April the 10th in 1191. After doing battle with the Saracens for several months, a truce was signed on September the 2nd, 1192, and the Crusaders set sail for home shortly thereafter. Templars had 4 estates in Shropshire, the main commandery at Lydley, and smaller holdings at Cardington, Stanton Long or Long Stanton, and Holt Preen. The estates employed bailiffs along with farm workers and a single household servant, either male or female, who made potage for the farm workers. The first Shropshire manor given to the Templars was round the Lawley, known as Lydley Hayes, where they set up their headquarters for the county. This was a large manor, including some forest and wood. In the first year, the sheriff sold off all the stock, thus saving the costs of employing 2 shepherds, a cowherd and a swineherd. Although the Templars built a mill in the hamlet shortly before 1185 and seem to have had fish ponds, the preceptory building apparently stood on the site of Penkridge Hall, an isolated farmstead half a mile southeast of the hamlet, which in the 12th century was between the forest of Botwood and the open commons of the Lawley. Their initial endowments provided the Templars with a compact estate on the northern and southern slopes of the Lawley and Caercaradoc Hills, which they were quick to realise economic potential. And I might add, these were hills that on a summer's evening my father would take me walking on as a child. An outlying property at Turford, Richard's Castle, apparently belonged to the Templars in 1227, but had passed by 1255 to the Hospitallers of Dinmore. Lydley's remaining acquisitions after 1185 were in Corvedale. Most of them were held in demesne, an attempt to complement the upland economy of the home estate at Lydley, with land more suited to cereals. The earliest of these was Lawton Mill in Diddlebury, acquired in 1192, but their principal Corvedale property was some 6 miles up the valley at Stanton Long. 4 vergates were granted to Robert Walnisis circa 1225, and a tract of moorland was acquired circa 1255 from Thomas de Stanton, who conveyed the remainder of his estate here to the Templars. In 1266 they made an unsuccessful claim to the adversary of Stanton Long. Other great potential value was the adjoining manor of Castle Holgate with its barony. This was leased to the Templars of Lydley from circa 1263 until shortly before 1284. Like earlier and later lords of the manor, they seem to have held it in demesne. Templar corn from Castle Holgate was seized circa 1274 by Sir John Gifford of Corfham while it was being carried to Ludlow. The Templars were involved in several lawsuits which they exercised with some vigour. Lydney's interest in Cornwall may explain the appearance of the Ludlow merchant Roger de Huyton as one of the tenants in a vary in 1255. By 1314, the Templar estate at Lydley, and most of that elsewhere in Cardington parish, had come under the hands of Edmund, Earl of Arundel, who had some claim upon it as heir to one of their founders. His title was confirmed by the Hospitallers in 1324. Cardington Church with Holt Preen and Stanton Long passed to the Hospitallers of Dinmore. The existing site of the preceptory, called Penkeridge Hall, by 1770 was apparently built by its tenant Rowland Whitbrook in the 1590s. William FitzAlan gave the Templars Cardington, Enmarsh and half of Chatwell. He ordered the rector of Cardington to pay the Templars 3 merks a year, and the tenant of Cardington Mill had to pay 5 shillings. In 1167 the parish was known as Templars Cardington, with the people sharing the privileges of the knights. In 1167, 1187 and 1200 the King's Justice of the Forest fined the people of Cardington for taking trees from the woods, but in 1187 and 1200 the knights claimed that they could not be taxed or fined, and the judge dismissed the case. The parish priest was a rector, but the church with all its property was given to the Templars. The prior head of the Templars was now rector of Cardington, but not a priest, thus he could not minister the sacraments. Instead, he took all the money for the rectory and paid a poor priest a small sum to act as vicar in the place. From that time onwards, a large part of the income of the church had gone to the lay rector, while the vicar had the remainder. After the church had been given to the Templars, the yearly tax, which each parish had to pay to the Pope, went to the Templars instead, and so Cardington was amongst the few places which were free of taxes to the papacy. The Templars had 34 tenants in a manor at Cardington. Of these, 6 paid a small sum each year, fraternitate, for the privilege of being regarded as associates of the Templars, and so having their protection. Among these were Innard the vicar, who paid 6pence, and Matilda, his wife, despite him being expected to be celibate, who paid 4pence per annum. In Cardington Church, in 1291, Cardington Church and his property was valued at £17, 6 and 8pence a year, while the vicar received £4 and the rest went to the Templars. And many of the estates to those who had given to them, and the rest were given to the Knights Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, a similar order. The manor of Cardington was restored to the FitzAlans, who presented it to the Knights Hospitallers. But in 1316, the Hospitallers had returned it to Edward FitzAlan, Earl Arundel. 8 years later, the Grand Prior of the Knights of St. John confirmed this gift, keeping only the refectory of the church and its endowment for the order. Longstaunton Manor received the normal rents from tenants and also received income from Bridgenorth, Kenley, and Cecilia de Lawton for a watermill. Employees included a carter, 4 ploughmen, a maid who made pottage for the farm workers, a servant who stayed on after the harvest, and a servant employed as a custodian of the manor or bailiff. Preen, a small manor, employees included 2 ploughmen, a boy who made pottage for the farm workers, and a servant who acted as custodian of the manor or bailiff. The old Norman Ludlow Castle was becoming too small for its inhabitants, and between 1140 and 1177 an outer bailey was built to the south and east of the castle, creating a large open space. In the process, the entrance of the castle shifted from the south-east to face the growing town of Ludlow. Gilbert de Lacy probably built the circular chapel in the inner bailey, resembling the churches of the Templar. This structure is known as the Chapel of St. Mary Magdalene, the Templars having a close affinity to Mary Magdalene. Gilbert de Lacy also gave several properties to the Knights Templar. After 1158 he became a Templar and fought in the Crusades. He travelled through France to Jerusalem, where Lacy became the precentor of the Templars in the county of Tripoli. In 1163 de Lacy was one of the Crusader army commanders fighting against Nur al-Din. All Saints' Church is in the village of Claverley can trace its origins back to the 7th century. The present church was founded by Roger de Montgomery, 1st Earl of Shrewsbury, who died in 1094. It contains a frieze of mounted knights which dominates the nave. It's part of an extensive mural screen from the first quarter of the 13th century, suggesting that Claverley was a royal chapel and linking it to the Knights Templar. A Knights Hospitaller preceptory at Halston was bequeathed by Roger de Powys. The preceptory would go on by the mid-14th century, to become by the mid-14th century the main administrative centre for the Hospitallers' estates in northern England and Wales. Following the dissolution of the monasteries, the site passed into the hands of the Mitten family of Mad Jack fame, who I've issued a vlog on, who under the terms of the lease had to reside in a preceptory. This subsequently became the manor house, its successor, although its present hold dates back to 1690. Near War, just over the border in Staffordshire, a chapel linked to the medieval military order of the Knights Templar existed. It was situated in the township of Onnerley, in the parish of Madeley. There are records dating this chapel to between the late 14th century right up to the early 17th century. Henry II granted lands of the order in Kiel circa 1169 or 1168, where the preceptory was built in the early 13th century, and the first preceptor in place by 1271. It's recorded that they held lands in Nantwich, Cheshire, Onnerley, and Newcastle-under-Lyme, Staffordshire, and Stanton, Shropshire. I assume this to mean Stanton-on-Hythe, from their base at Kiel in Staffordshire. When the order was disbanded in the same year, the estate was taken by the Lord of Newcastle-under-Lyme, but later forfeited to the king, who was granted the land and its holdings. After holding it till 1314, back to the Lord of Newcastle, until his execution in 1322, when it was finally granted to the Knights Hospitaller in 1324. They then ruled the Kiel estate from their preceptory in Holston, Shropshire. In 1352, the Hospitallers who inherited the landholdings also held rents in Batterley in Staffordshire. Knights Templar were dismantled in the rolls of the Catholic Church in 1309. Following the suppression of the order, a number of Knights Templar joined the newly established Order of Christ, which effectively reabsorbed the Knights Templar. When King Philip IV of France suppressed the order in 1307, King Edward II of England at first refused to believe the accusations. Indeed, the accusations were commercially and politically motivated and quite scurrilous. But for many of the myths repeated today about the Knights, Pope Clement V issued a papal bull which granted the lands of the Templars to the Knights Hospitaller, but this was ignored until 1324. After the intercession of Pope Clement V, King Edward ordered the seizure of members of the order in England on the 8th of January 1308. Templar lands and assets were given to the Order of the Hospital of St. John, a sister military organisation, though the English Crown held some of the assets until 1338. The largest proportion of the Templars joined the Hospitallers, while others remained members of a Cistercian order or lived on a pension as lay members of society. The loss of the Holy Lands as a base for war against the Muslims had removed the primary reason for the Templars' existence, and the dissolved order now faded into history, in England as well as the rest of Europe. The myth and mysticism associated with the Knights Templar originate with organisations claiming a relationship with the original Templars. Although I don't wish to diminish the incredible contribution towards mysticism of both Christian and other religions made by St. Bernard of Clairvaux, some of the most important organisations claiming allegiance to the original Templars would include the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem, a self-styled order which was publicly disclosed in 1804 and accredited as a non-governmental organisation, that is NGO, by the UN in 2001. Templari Cattolici d'Italia traces its roots back to the Italian Templars that separated from the French Templars. Freemasonry has incorporated the symbols and rituals of several medieval military orders in a number of Masonic bodies since the late 18th century. This can be seen in the Red Cross of Constantine, inspired by the military Constantine Order, the Order of Malta inspired by the Knights Hospitaller, and the Order of the Temple inspired by the Knights Templar. The Order of Malta and the Temple feature prominently in the American York Rite. The Canton Caves are a series of man-made underground chambers in the grounds of Canton Hall near Beckbury. They are widely purported to contain a Templar chapel. The original purpose and date of construction, however, are disputed, though most authoritative sources date them to the 19th century. Some signs of Templar imagery are probably associated with one of these more modern orders claiming a relationship to the Templars. Myths also link the Templars with the Holy Grail, which been as associated with Alderbury Abbey, Whittington Castle and Hawkstone Follies. On a personal note, I find these myths something of a distraction when the history of the knights in Shropshire is rich and certainly deserves further study.